Mark Phillips, CBS News, on the Tora Bora front in Afghanistan.
More now on the fierce fighting at Tora Bora and the rest of the ongoing campaign in Afghanistan from CBS News national security correspondent David Martin. David?
Dan, somewhere between 300 and 1,000 al-Qaeda fighters, probably including Osama bin Laden, are trapped in those Tora Bora mountains, cut off from resupplies of food, water, and ammunition.
The commanders of the opposition forces are telling the U.S. al-Qaeda's last bastion should fall within 24 to 48 hours. The American commander is not willing to predict how much longer the Battle of Tora Bora will last, but he says it's only a matter of time.
We can wait longer than they can, and we'll maintain pressure on this pocket of al-Qaeda until they are ours.
American commandos are on the front lines fighting with the opposition forces, slowly but steadily advancing as the al-Qaeda fighters are forced to abandon position after position.
We have taken al-Qaeda prisoners in this fight, and yes, we have removed documents and other sort of evidentiary matters from this complex.
There is nothing they can do to stop the relentless pounding by American warplanes.
A lot of people have lost their lives in these valleys in this al-Qaeda pocket.
To the west, the Marines drove right through what was once the Taliban's main stronghold of Kandahar on their way to take control of the city's international airport. No one tried to stop them, but there is still a concern about die-hard Taliban and al-Qaeda.
We do know that there are pockets of resistance, if you will. So we are maintaining our vigilance.
The hunt for Mullah Omar is taking place in the mountains northwest of Kandahar, which is where his clan is based and where U.S. intelligence believes he is hiding. Unlike Tora Bora, U.S. planes are not bombing these mountains. Instead, they are dropping leaflets offering a reward for Omar, while American commandos press the hunt on the ground. But Frank says the trail has gone cold.
Right now, we simply don't have a good lead.
No matter when Tora Bora falls, Frank says it will take months to figure out which Taliban and al-Qaeda leaders have been killed, which have been captured, and which remain at large. Dan?
Live at the Pentagon, David Martin. During that same briefing with reporters today, General Tommy Franks disclosed that the so-called American Taliban, John Walker of California, is no longer in Afghanistan. Walker, who was captured early in the war and wounded during a Taliban prisoner uprising, had been held at the U.S. Marine base in southern Afghanistan. He is now at sea in Marine custody still aboard an amphibious assault vessel, the USS Peleliu. There was a wide range of reaction around the world today to the so-called smoking gun videotape of Osama bin Laden. Nations supporting the U.S.-led war on terrorism, including the governments of Muslim countries such as Saudi Arabia and Turkey, said the tape convinced them of bin Laden's guilt. But CBS's Lee Cowan reports many other Muslims remain deeply suspicious of the tape and American motives.
It may have been the tape seen round the world, but in the Muslim world, it's the tape that drew a curious audience that in the end walked away disgusted.
It was just a propaganda against Osama bin Laden. But I don't think so that it's true. It's just fake.
Much of the Arab world watched the tape live on the region's most influential media outlet, Al Jazeera TV. But along with the tape, they heard this too. A guest calling the tape fabricated. In his words, a scandal by all measures. And this morning's Arabic newspapers seem to agree.
The skepticism which spread in the Arab and the Muslim worlds, I believe, still there, and very little minds were changed after the tapes.
Abdul Bari Atwan edits an independent Arabic newspaper, and he's one of the few who thought the tape warranted a banner headline. Many of the state-sponsored papers thought otherwise. This Egyptian newspaper devoted little more than a paragraph to the tape.
Does it surprise you that there's not more front-page coverage?
Some people believe that it's not really that significant, the story. And some people believe this is American propaganda, so why shall we play it to the hands of the American propaganda?
And it's just that sentiment that some fear could lead to just the opposite reaction from what the White House was hoping for. Instead of exposing Osama bin Laden as the mastermind behind the worst terrorist attack in history, it could also make him out to be one of the Arab world's greatest heroes. Lee Cowan, CBS News, London.
President Bush, who first viewed the bin Laden tape more than 2 weeks ago, offered his own reaction to it today during a White House visit by the Prime Minister of Thailand. CBS's Bill Plant reports the president had some choice words for those who call the tape American propaganda.
President Bush ridiculed the notion that the tape had been doctored as hoping for the best about an evil man. He branded the video a devastating declaration of guilt.
It is preposterous for anybody to think that this tape is doctored. That's just a feeble excuse to provide weak support for an incredibly evil man.
The Bush administration claims that bin Laden's own statements show he planned the attack. Bin Laden says, "We calculated in advance the number of casualties from the enemy." Referring to his construction background, he said, "They were overjoyed when the first plane hit the building, so I said to them, be patient."
Somebody who encourages young people to go kill themselves, and he himself refuses to stand and fight.
And as U.S. and Afghan forces close in, Mr. Bush said again he wants bin Laden and that he doesn't care how.
Dead or alive, either way. I don't know whether we're going to get him tomorrow, or a month from now, or a year from now. I really don't know. But we're going to get him.
The president said he had mixed emotions about releasing the bin Laden tape. He called it a vivid reminder of tragedy and loss. But his staff is glad that he did for those very reasons. Dan?
Bill Plant reporting live from the White House. Federal officials now think they know the identity of a man seen on the tape with bin Laden. They believe the man is Sheikh Ali bin Saeed al-Ghamdi, a Saudi Arabian Islamic cleric known for his strong anti-Western views. He was a professor of Islamic theology before being arrested by the Saudi government in 1995. President Bush and other top U.S. officials have said repeatedly that the war on terrorism will not end in Afghanistan, even with total victory over the Taliban and the capture or killing of Osama bin Laden. So what's next after Afghanistan? The Philippines, Somalia? CBS's Wyatt Andrews has some answers.
To President Bush, the end of the Taliban does not end the war. What comes next, he says, is a global hunt for al-Qaeda terrorists who are hiding in dozens of countries.
And that is the reason this great nation with our friends and allies will not rest until we bring them all to justice.
The CIA and Pentagon have already focused on 5 countries: the Philippines, Yemen, Somalia, the Sudan, and Bosnia, which harbor al-Qaeda or its allies. A U.S. intelligence team has just visited Somalia, gathering information on the al-Qaeda presence there.
I think clearly that there's going to be a phase 2.
Retired General Ron Fogelman says the first U.S. tactic will be a demand that local governments shut down al-Qaeda themselves. U.S. forces will be kept to a minimum, and countries like the Sudan and Yemen, seeing what happened in Afghanistan, won't see a choice.
For countries to see that this coalition and this nation had the wherewithal and the will to go in and change a regime has got to have had a big impact on them.
But the president is not just focused on al-Qaeda. His speeches also mention rogue states with weapons of mass destruction.
They have been warned. They are being watched. And they will be held to account.
Where exactly does the president mean? In Washington, there is a drumbeat to target Iraq.
The war on terrorism will not be over until we take down Saddam Hussein, because so long as he's in power in Iraq, he's not just a thorn in our side, he's a threat to American lives.
The hawks in Washington argue it's now or never in Iraq, while the more cautious warn there's no Allied support for attacking Saddam. Right now, officials insist no formal decisions on Phase 2 have been made. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
Coming up next on the Friday CBS Evening News, the country that could just be the new best friend of American drivers. And then later, Eye on America. When the terrorists struck, this man was ready to serve.
You've known already. Bid for oil influence succeeds, says the Petroleum Finance Corporation's Roger Diwan.
It changes really dramatically the relationship that Saudi Arabia has with the United States. So this game has tremendous geopolitical implications.
Russia's resurgence has been remarkable. In just 5 years, it has increased oil production from less than 6 to more than 7 million barrels a day. And within the next 5 years, some predict Russia will surpass Saudi Arabia as the world's largest oil producer.
I think Russian production has nowhere to go but up.
Moscow-based oil analyst Steven Deshevsky says Russia's role will only get stronger.
To put it in numbers, the global oil supply this year increased by about 1 million barrels per day. Half of that came from Russia.
But some wonder why the Russians have been so eager to push up production and push down prices.
Picking winners in an oil price war is like picking winners in a nuclear war. There will be none.
Except, of course, the consumer. For now, consider your lower gas bill a gift from America's new oil ally. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
Coming up next, the hunt goes on for Osama bin Laden and for Mullah Omar, the Taliban leader, who used to live here till U.S. bombs made a house call. Eye on America shows you new high-tech military hardware that could make the hunt for al-Qaeda less dangerous for U.S. forces. Plus, football fan frenzy and a team official's questionable defense.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Osama bin Laden is still at large. So is his principal accomplice, the Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar. Where they are, no one knows. The best guess among U.S. intelligence agents is that bin Laden is either still holed up somewhere in the enormous Tora Bora cave complex or has slipped away into Pakistan. The destruction of bin Laden's terrorist army in the Tora Bora region is said to be nearly complete. CBS News correspondents will have reports tonight from all around Afghanistan, but we begin at the Defense Department with an overview of the war from David Martin.
Opposition and U.S. Special Operations Forces rolled into the Tora Bora Mountains in pursuit of fleeing al-Qaeda fighters. But the Pentagon says it's anyone's guess where bin Laden is.
I'm not sure how close we ever really have been. We have narrowed it down to an area. Indicators were there, and now indicators are not there. So maybe he still is there, maybe he was killed, or maybe he's left.
The indications included intercepted shortwave radio communications. Someone thought they heard bin Laden himself barking out orders in Arabic. But now that his fighters have been routed, bin Laden's radio has gone silent.
There has been less chatter in the last few days. And that would make sense because there are fewer fighters now in those caves.
Some of the shell-shocked al-Qaeda prisoners have told their captors bin Laden was there.
I think what we're going to see now is more information that comes from those at whom we can interrogate and pick up the trail from there.
Marines at the Kandahar airport have begun building a compound to hold as many as 300 prisoners. But sorting out the leaders of al-Qaeda and the Taliban is proving to be a major problem.
We're still trying to sort out who we have and who we don't have, and who's been killed. And it is not an easy process.
The U.S. is holding 5 prisoners aboard this ship off the coast of Pakistan. One is the American John Walker, who will probably be transferred to the same Virginia court where Zacharias Moussaoui, the man suspected of being the 20th hijacker, is facing trial. Another is an Australian captured with the Taliban. The other 3 are believed to be members of al-Qaeda.
One of them is a Saudi who headed a humanitarian organization in Afghanistan that U.S. intelligence says was a front for al-Qaeda. He was injured by the American bombing and escaped to Pakistan for treatment, but Pakistan has now turned him in. U.S. officials believe he knows a lot about the inner workings of al-Qaeda, but so far he's not talking. Dan?
Live at the Pentagon, David Martin. Despite their disappointment at not yet tracking down Osama bin Laden, U.S. officials vow never to give up the hunt until he is captured or proven dead. And as CBS's Mark Phillips reports from Tora Bora tonight, they hope to pry the secret of where he is from some of those who've suffered in his service.
The wretched face of defeat for the al-Qaeda organization that had terrorized the world. At least that's the way the Afghan warlords of the Tora Bora Mountains would like to see it. They put 19 of their prisoners on display like trophies, evidence, they said, of the fall of the last al-Qaeda stronghold. They were bandaged, limping, old, young, some defiant, some ashamed. And they all had that faraway look that comes from having endured the ferocious American aerial bombardment that had pounded them night and day. They had been taken where they had sheltered, The bombing had been halted so the local militias could move in and mop up. Osama bin Laden had promised them the glory of a holy war in the name of Islam, but when they were captured, they begged for mercy and for water. This man from Kuwait said he hadn't had a drink in 3 days. But if this display of prisoners was meant to show that this victory was complete, in fact, it proved the opposite. Of the up to 1,000 al-Qaeda fighters said to have been holed up in these hills, the 3 militias here can account for less than 100. Many, they said, are dead in the mountains. It seems many have also escaped. But the main question still, after what's being called the fall of Tora Bora, isn't the prisoners the Afghan militias do have, it's the one they don't. Of the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden, the militia commanders could offer no news. They'd continue to look for him, they said. It was the duty of all Afghans to do so, if he's still in Afghanistan. But today, the booty of war was all they found. Al-Qaeda supplies and weapons being carried down the mountain on donkeys. And already the fragile alliance of the militias was showing signs of strain. A fierce argument broke out between rival bands over who got what. If the battle is over here, the field has been left to the scavengers. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Tora Bora, Afghanistan.
One reason U.S. and Afghan forces are having such a hard time finding bin Laden and his remaining al-Qaeda fighters is because of a ruthless adversary, Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain. As you head south towards the Pakistan border, the peaks of the White Mountains rise above 14,000 feet. From a distance, they appear to be sheer cliffs, but a closer look reveals hundreds of small openings, the only outward signs of a complex and interconnected series of caves and tunnels, including the elaborately fortified Tora Bora cave complex, where the last of the al-Qaeda holdouts remain. There are many ways into the caves and many escape routes out. So it's likely that hundreds of al-Qaeda fighters, flushed out by American bombs, have dispersed. Many headed deeper into the snowy and wooded White Mountains, some reportedly on donkey, trying to make their getaway past the border into Pakistan. In southern and western Afghanistan, U.S. forces are hunting for the Taliban leader Mullah Omar. CBS's Richard Roth reports from Kandahar that some ugly truths about Omar and his terrorist friends are coming to light, even as the city begins coming back to life.
What's missing in Kandahar, spinning in enjoyment of the ordinary, is all the leadership that's vanished. This was the Taliban's stronghold, and though it's fallen to a coalition of militias armed to the teeth, the Taliban's strongmen, it seems, have slipped away. Still, their departure has uncorked the built-up pressure of simple pleasures forbidden under the strict rule of Supreme Leader Mullah Omar, who's reportedly hiding in the mountains 100 miles northwest of here, and who, it turns out, kept his own taste for the good life well hidden.
This is the house of Omar.
This is the house Osama built, bin Laden's gift to his Taliban host.
He was showing himself like a simple man, but he was not simple.
Omar lived secluded in air-conditioned comfort till American bombs delivered an eviction notice. American and British special operations troops here are uncovering some darker secrets too. A UN agency worked in this complex until al-Qaeda moved in and turned it into a control center for terrorists. The evidence left behind when the Taliban left in a hurry. A makeshift gym and a mass of paperwork, instructions for bomb makers and computer hackers. Cleaning up the remnants of al-Qaeda here and securing a city where it seems every man has a gun and every boy is learning to shoot falls to this man, Gul Aga. He's Kandahar's former warlord and new governor, dispensing patronage and hospitality and a huge promise. There'll be security on the streets within 2 weeks, he says, but in the past 20 years, only the Taliban achieved that kind of control. Gulaga's name means Mr. Flower, but the local symbol here is still a bouquet of grenades. Richard Roth, CBS News, Kandahar.
Southeast of Kandahar, the city's battered main airport is being transformed into home base for some 2,000 U.S. Marines now in Afghanistan. One of those Marines had to be evacuated from the country and his foot amputated after stepping on a landmine. As CBS's Alan Pizzi reports, such dangers are everywhere.
A pile of weapons, mines and explosives left by the Taliban blows up at Kandahar airport. The danger of hundreds of pounds of explosives removed by controlled explosion, but some is found the hard way. One Marine lost a foot and 2 others were wounded by a landmine yesterday afternoon. The white tape marks the path ordnance disposal experts cleared for the medics, probing with knives in ground as hard as concrete. And as these men risked their own lives, they tried to keep the victim calm.
We were talking to him to keep him conscious, as far as asking where he's from, asking him his name.
And the wounded Marine was talking back.
He was worried that we were going to hurt ourselves, and my comment to him was we get paid $150 extra a month for that, so not to worry about it.
The Marines had been checking this building for mines and other explosives and were back on what they thought was safe ground when the mine went off.
Our first indication that there's a minefield would be when one guy steps on one.
Even craters from American bombs have to be checked. The enemy knows they make natural foxholes, one expert said, so sometimes they leave anti-personnel mines in them. In order to bring in bigger aircraft for the humanitarian aid effort, the Marines will have to extend their perimeter around the airport, the job that will push them deeper into unknown territory where landmines could be lurking, the kind of work that cost a Marine his foot yesterday. The good news is that there are men here willing to hunt for those mines.
What you're dealing with is you could lose your life at some time, and once you come to terms with that, it makes the job a lot easier, and you know that your job is making other people safe.
And there will be work here for as long as Marine boots are on the ground. Alan Pizzi with U.S. Marines at Kandahar Airport.
Britain edged closer today to accepting leadership of a planned United Nations peacekeeping force in Afghanistan. British Prime Minister Tony Blair said as many as 1,500 British troops could participate. But the multinational force must first be authorized by the UN Security Council and accepted by the interim Afghan government that takes office on Saturday. An American diplomat declared the U.S. Embassy in Kabul open for business today as a liaison office. A squad of U.S. Marines in battle dress performed a close order drill and raised the Stars and Stripes. It's the same flag taken down when the last U.S. diplomats left Afghanistan almost 13 years ago. Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America, making warfare safer for U.S. forces. We'll show you the latest state-of-the-art in high-tech military hardware. And then later, a dangerous aerial assault launched by angry football fans. Pence demand for ending violence against Israel. Demand for ending violence against Israel. And Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians, including a 12-year-old boy. Palestinians held a funeral march in the West Bank for another of those killed, a leader of the militant group Hamas, shot when Israeli troops tried to arrest him. The Bush administration urged Americans in Haiti to stay home today after a violent coup attempt there. Gunmen, possibly former Army troops, attacked the National Palace in Port-au-Prince. At least 7 people died before police recaptured the building. Haiti's president was at his home several miles away and was not harmed. Tonight's Eye on America is a hard news look into the future of American war technology. This exotic 21st century arsenal has a very basic mission: to save American lives. So where are these new weapons coming from and what are they? CBS's Mark Strassman has a preview.
Well behind Afghanistan's front lines, America's military is now recruiting a new Special Forces unit. The best and brightest scientists working in the research labs of college campuses. This is the remote-controlled gadget the Pentagon wants most for Christmas.
This is a micro-aerial vehicle.
The MAV can carry explosives, but a mini-camera on board makes its main purpose reconnaissance.
Down and around trees, in and around buildings, and look inside of things where all of our other airborne reconnaissance assets would simply look from above.
Soon, the MAV could make the hunt for Al-Qaeda much safer.
That's the ultimate advantage, is you get U.S. Armed Forces personnel out of harm's way.
On American college campuses and in science labs, military research has new prestige, urgency, and funding. For instance, hidden away here at Clemson University is the making of some dramatic new stealth technology.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and start the vent.
Nanotechnology, a blend of physics, chemistry, and material science, built a new material that can mask reflecting light and confuse enemy radar. The Pentagon wants to wrap its older planes in this material, eventually retrofitting any active B-52, now 40 years old, with stealth capability.
It would disappear. right? Or at least it would become very, very small, small enough that you couldn't distinguish it from a bird or something of that nature.
Pull back at this time. Other new science reaches to the battlefield's wounded.
This is the gel.
Georgia Tech's new biogel could become instant triage.
It's very tough. It's elastic, too, so it will move with you.
On a wound, it keeps out dirt and infection, but allows the skin to breathe.
We're only trying to keep people alive until you can get them to a surgeon.
On this so-called smart shirt, sensors and interwoven fiber optics monitor a soldier's vital signs and any tears caused during battle.
Has he been hurt, or how badly he's been hurt, and what are the chances of going and saving him on battlefield?
The shirt becomes an information beacon. Its global positioning system can relay a soldier's location and condition to anywhere in the world. It's now clear America's global war on terrorism will be fought not only on the battlefield, but on the front line of science. In Atlanta, this is Mark Strassman for Eye on America.
Researchers say they may have the first medicine to make common colds less severe and go away faster. Unlike cold remedies that mask the symptoms, this drug attacks cold viruses directly. Accomplice. Injured prisoners in an Afghan hospital threatened to blow themselves up. A scare at another New York landmark. Fire damages a world-famous cathedral just a week before Christmas. And Eye on America, we'll show you how some U.S. Army forces are preparing for battle.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Step by step, cave by cave. That's how a U.S. Marine Corps general describes the hunt now for Osama bin Laden, which is centered in the rugged mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Bin Laden may be hiding in some Tora Bora tunnel, or dead, buried in the rubble of a cave. He may be somewhere else, or he may have slipped away. U.S. officials insist bin Laden will, sooner or later, be found, as will his partner in terror, the Taliban leader, Mullah Mohammed Omar, who's already been allowed to slip away twice. Our coverage begins with CBS's David Martin.
A Pakistani helicopter patrols the rugged border with Afghanistan. Troops fan out to seal Osama bin Laden's most likely avenue of escape, and the Deputy Secretary of Defense warns that any country providing bin Laden refuge will regret it.
Any country in the world that would knowingly harbor bin Laden would be out of their minds, and I think they've seen what happened to the Taliban.
The al-Qaeda prisoners captured in Tora Bora have not given the U.S. any useful leads to bin Laden's whereabouts.
I think one guy claims that he saw bin Laden from several hundred yards away.
He could be dead or still hiding inside one of the many caves which line the valley walls and which now must be searched.
In each of those valleys you have several hundred caves, and you want to go through very methodically, one by one.
Best guess? He is still on the run somewhere in the Tora Bora Mountains where the bombing has stopped, but the hunt goes on.
As we stand in front of you right now, there are no bombs being dropped in support of forces, but they are flying overhead and available to do that.
15 of the most important prisoners among the hundreds of Taliban and al-Qaeda captured in northern Afghanistan have now been transferred to Kandahar Airport. They're not likely to know where bin Laden is, but FBI agents still have a lot of questions to ask them.
Our primary goal is to see if we can gather information to try to prevent future attacks against Americans. And then obviously a secondary role is to try to garnish any information, evidence concerning the past attacks against us.
But there's no guarantee any of bin Laden's followers will talk.
They can be a hard group, and sometimes it's very difficult to get them to talk to you.
As for Mullah Omar, the trail had gone cold, but tonight U.S. officials say there are new intelligence reports indicating he is still in the mountains northwest of Kandahar. Dan?
Live at the Pentagon, David Martin. Searching for Osama bin Laden or his body in the bomb-blasted caves of Tora Bora is a dangerous task. As Defense Secretary Rumsfeld said today, it is, quote, tough, dirty, hard work. It could also take a long time. And as CBS's Mark Phillips reports, it appears U.S. Special Operations troops have drawn the duty.
If the hunt for Osama bin Laden is continuing here, these anti-al-Qaeda fighters aren't part of it. They're bringing their tanks down off the Tora Bora mountains. This battle was about regaining territory for them, not finding wanted terrorist leaders. And following them in vehicles with "Don't Bomb Me" chevron markings on their roofs, Westerners, probably Americans who'd been spotting for the bombers, were leaving as well. But in the upper valleys of the Tora Bora range, the Afghan fighters said other Americans were continuing the hunt. They had recently been through this bombed-out camp. There's plenty of evidence of al-Qaeda having been here, but no sign of bin Laden. This, we were told, had been the entrance to a cave or tunnel before the bombs dropped. If there are any bodies inside, it'll take heavy machinery to dig out the rubble and get at them. Bin Laden's followers may no longer be here, but they've left deadly reminders behind. Anti-personnel mines litter the camp. And of these camps where al-Qaeda recruits were seen training on these parallel bars in videos distributed around the world, the bars are about the only structure that remains. If bin Laden was here, where may he have gone? Pick a valley. These mountains are full of them, with well-trodden trails, plenty of cover, and Pakistan just over those ridges. To get there, the local Afghan fighters say, there are 1,000 ways. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Tora Bora, Afghanistan.
If bin Laden does find one of those 1,000 waves into Pakistan, he'll also find thousands of Pakistani troops waiting for him. Pakistan says it has already captured scores of al-Qaeda members. Some captured al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters are reportedly begging for mercy from their Afghan and Pakistani keepers. A common plea is in effect, "My brother, please don't turn me over to the Americans." But some al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan remain defiant. They are not running. CBS's Richard Roth reports on one group holding out in Kandahar, the center of the search for the Taliban leader, Mullah Omar.
Finding Mullah Omar may be the biggest risky challenge authorities here face, but the fact is almost every dilemma in Kandahar has a measure of danger. Like the problem at Mirwais Hospital, where only guards are supposed to have weapons, but where just as al-Qaeda troops were leaving town, 18 Arab fighters were dropped off for treatment, wounded, armed with pistols and grenades, and threatening to blow themselves up if anyone but doctors or nurses came close.
In general, they were telling us that we will suicide.
Will commit suicide?
Yes.
And kill others in the process?
Of course.
Medical personnel treated them out of obligation, they say, but no one seemed to mind when 9 of the men disappeared in the middle of the night, and the other 9 agreed to be moved. They're now in a separate hospital wing in beds behind bars.
Moving the 9 men has eased the security problem, but it hasn't solved the political one. No one has attempted to put them under arrest, so officially they're still patients here and not prisoners.
And authorities believe there are surely other havens for pro-Taliban holdouts here, in a city just beginning to climb out of conflict. Richard Roth, CBS News, Kandahar.
As we reported to you recently directly from the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, decades of war have left that country littered with landmines. And today, another American soldier was seriously wounded by one of them. It happened at Bagram Air Base north of Kabul as U.S. Army troops were clearing anti-personnel mines. The unidentified soldier lost a foot. Just yesterday, a U.S. Marine had a leg amputated after stepping on a mine at Kandahar Airport. In a reminder of why U.S. forces are risking life and limb, the Marines occupying the airport raised a huge American flag, sent to them by the New York Police Department. The flag had flown at Ground Zero. It bears the notes and signatures of hundreds of emergency workers and names of victims. Elsewhere in the war on terrorism, the government of Yemen for the first time used military force against a village in a remote province said to be harboring al-Qaeda terrorists. Yemeni officials say at least a dozen people were killed in a 3-hour battle. Since gunmen stormed India's parliament last week, leaving at least 13 people dead, Indian leaders have blamed neighboring Pakistan for the attack. Pakistan denies it, but the dispute is the threat to the U.S.-led war on terrorism. And possibly worse, as White House correspondent John Roberts reports tonight, it raises the threat of actual nuclear war.
The accusations over last Thursday's attack brought tensions between India and Pakistan another step closer to the breaking point today. Now the White House is working feverishly to prevent an eruption between 2 key allies in the war on terrorism.
This is not a reason for India and Pakistan to take action against each other. This is a time for India and Pakistan to take action against the terrorists.
India claims it was Islamic militants under the control of Pakistan's intelligence service who struck at the very heart of its democracy. And invoking President Bush's words that those who support terrorism are terrorists themselves, officials vowed they would strike back.
This time, the terrorists and their mentors across the border had the temerity to try to wipe out the entire political leadership of India.
The declaration has profound implications now that India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapons. They have already fought 3 wars and came to the brink of a 4th just 2 years ago. Pakistan, which has fiercely denied any involvement in the Parliament attack, promised a swift and strong response to any Indian retaliation.
India needs to realize that Pakistan has the capability to respond. So it would not be a very sensible thing for the Indians to do to conduct such an operation.
Since September 11, President Bush has actively embraced both Pakistan and India. Now Mr. Bush finds himself standing between belligerent neighbors in a region the CIA says is the most likely flashpoint for a nuclear war.
You've got 2 major nuclear weapon states with a series of crises, misperceptions, politicians in both countries denying the legitimacy of the position of the other. So I think there is a significant crisis potential here.
The White House today admonished Pakistan to rein in terrorists under its influence and counseled India that while it has the right to self-defense, it should show restraint in any retaliation. Diplomats hope that cooler heads prevail, saying the risk for anything else is just too great. Dan?
Live at the White House, John Roberts. U.S. health officials are now offering anthrax vaccine and/or an extra 40 days of antibiotics to thousands of congressional and postal workers. Many already took antibiotics as a precaution, but there is growing medical concern that inhaled anthrax spores can lurk even after the standard 2 months of drug treatment. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, New York firefighters call attack on Parliament. Ready to interrogate prisoners in Afghanistan, still looking for clues to the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden. On the Health Watch, important news for people who take aspirin and ibuprofen at the same time. And Eye on America introduces you to one of the heroes of September 11th.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. The number is staggering. The latest estimate of the damage the September 11th attack on America did to the U.S. economy. In a new report, the International Monetary Fund puts the loss at more than $21 billion.
And serious charges involving terrorism. We're going to begin with that story tonight.
100 days later, it is the eve of winter, and the work here continues in the bitter, windy cold.
They come without fail and without hesitation. Firemen, cops, engineers, crane operators, 1,000 of them a day for the past 100 days and 100 nights.
Since day one, September the 12th, the morning of the 12th, we come down here and we've been here ever since. Same thing, 6 days on, 1 day off, 12 hours per day.
To the untrained eye, Ground Zero is a colossal mess, but enormous progress has been made. More than 800,000 tons of debris have been cleared, 60,000 truckloads of fallen steel carted away. Over time, workers have conquered the burning mountain of rubble left on September 11th and tamed 16 acres of hell by moving heaven and earth. What was once a pile is now a subterranean pit.
It's amazing how it started off. In some places, the debris pile was 5 to 7 stories high, and now we're down 4 floors below grade in some spots.
Just last week, iron workers took a torch to the last sections of the North Tower that were still standing.
There you go.
It's dangerous work, but that's not what bothers the men from Local 40.
Tell me what it's like to be tearing down a national monument like this.
We're not tearing it down. Osama bin Laden tore it down. We're just trying to get it out of here.
Come on down!
But along with the brute force, there is a part of the work here that is exquisitely delicate. Workers sift the earth gently, searching for the hundreds of victims whose bodies have yet to be found. Every so often they recover a fellow police officer or fireman, and respects are paid. It's the kind of work that can break your heart, even if you are a man of steel.
There's 3,000 people, over 3,000 people that were killed. And that's the only thing that keeps me going here.
These men can channel their grief into the job at hand. Outside the fence, there's a lot of pain and no place to put it. So they put it on a wall. Mitzi Scott came from Oregon.
I keep looking at it as if I look at it long enough, I can see some sense in it. But I can't, and I'm just profoundly sorry for all the families.
Winter is upon the city now, and there is a sadness, but there's hope too, and a lot of it comes from the top. Rudy Giuliani has been a rock for so many New Yorkers.
Everywhere, people talk about how does the mayor be both a cheerleader and a head mourner.
I've got to appeal to people to see beyond this, and that we have to show the people who tried to stop us that we're strong enough to cry, mourn, and then hold our heads very, very high and move forward.
Mayor Giuliani says he expects the cleanup at Ground Zero to last sometime into next summer. Christmas will come and go, and Memorial Day, and the 4th of July. So the workers will keep coming for another 100 days and another 100 after that.
President Bush took note of the 100-day milestone, and his spokesman said the war against those who attacked America is, and I quote, making great progress, unquote. David Martin at the Pentagon has the latest on the war and the still unsuccessful hunt for Osama bin Laden. David?
Dan, the latest intelligence reports indicate bin Laden's followers think he is still alive and on the move somewhere in the border area between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But there are no reports anyone has actually seen him in the past week.
U.S. Special Forces are now operating on the Pakistani side of the border, working with the Pakistani army to hunt down bin Laden or any other al-Qaeda fighter trying to escape from the caves of Tora Bora. Hundreds of prisoners are being captured. No one knows how many are getting away. There are no more targets left to bomb in Afghanistan, but still plenty of terrorists to be tracked down. Today, President Bush conducted a different kind of strike when he froze the assets of 2 more alleged terrorist groups, one of them a relief organization called UTN, run by a Pakistani nuclear scientist.
UTN claims to serve the hungry and needy of Afghanistan, but it was the UTN that provided information about nuclear weapons to al-Qaeda.
Searches of abandoned al-Qaeda sites inside Afghanistan have yet to find any evidence bin Laden succeeded in turning that information into an actual nuclear weapon. Although rockets made of depleted uranium, a heavy metal used to penetrate armor, have been discovered. Most of what bin Laden built in Afghanistan is now a shambles.
Over the past 100 days, we and our British allies and others in the coalition have destroyed at least 11 terrorist training camps inside Afghanistan. Terrorist factories that produce thousands of trained operatives.
When the war started, those operatives were planning attacks against Americans all over the world. A search of one al-Qaeda site in Afghanistan turned up surveillance photos of American installations in Singapore. Dan?
David Martin live at the Pentagon. In the case of American Taliban John Walker, this suggestion from a Vietnam War hero and former POW, Senator John McCain, quote, first show him Ground Zero and see how he feels after that. As for possible criminal charges, despite widespread reports that the decision has already been made, John Roberts reports a decision is still under intense debate.
Sources tell CBS News a classic bureaucratic turf war has broken out over John Walker. The Attorney General is pushing hard to take charge of the case. The Secretary of Defense urging a go-slow approach to gather all the facts. Today, President Bush came down on the side of the Pentagon and patience.
The President thinks it's important to be thorough, to be deliberative, to be judicious. More information needs to be gathered.
The White House wants more time to determine exactly what Walker's involvement was in Afghanistan. In interviews and interrogation, Walker says he joined a group of foreigners fighting for the Taliban while a student in Pakistan.
My heart became attached to them, and I wanted to help them one way or another.
Walker's identity was discovered following the bloody prison uprising at Mazar-e-Sharif. Wounded in the fighting, he claims to have passively endured a punishing battle.
They had bombed us with airplanes, they had shot missiles, they had thrown grenades, they had shot us with all types of guns, they had poured gas on us and burned us. They had done everything you can imagine.
Officials aren't yet sure what role Walker might have played in the fight or the death of CIA agent Mike Spann, seen here questioning him shortly before the uprising. Most of what is known has come from Walker's own statements, and with talk of charging him with treason, the government will need to do more, says legal analyst Andrew Cohen.
In the end, John Walker is going to be judged on what he did or didn't do, and not what he said or didn't say to a reporter or even to military officials. And if all that the military and the prosecutors have are these tapes, they're not going to get a conviction.
Sources tell CBS News that lacking all the facts and as well not sure exactly what it was that John Walker was involved in, they're asking the president to quickly charge him with something less than treason. At the Pentagon, though, which the Justice Department is afraid of losing the case to, there appears to be little appetite to actually claim it. What they're looking for is more time to develop the best case they can. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. Thanks. The UN Security Council today formally authorized a multinational force to keep the peace in and around Kabul. It will be led by Britain and could eventually number 5,000 soldiers. It is not expected to include Americans. The vanguard of the force is getting into place. Some 50 more British Royal Marine Commandos from a warship in the Arabian Sea arrived today at Bagram Air Base outside Kabul. About 200 Royal Marines are expected to be patrolling Kabul by Saturday, when Afghanistan's interim government takes power. The president of Argentina resigned today amid continuing violence sparked by a deepening economic crisis. At least 20 people have died. Mounted riot police today battled hundreds of anti-government demonstrators. A trade union is calling for a general strike to protest tough austerity measures and an unemployment rate close to 20%. And in South Africa, the roof of a shopping mall collapsed onto an indoor ice rink, trapping scores of skaters, many of them children. But police and soldiers were able to rescue them all from the rubble. At least 21 people were seriously hurt, but no deaths were reported. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News from Ground Zero, we'll bring you an update on the rebuilding of the Pentagon 100 days after the attack.
It looks and sounds like in the face of bin Laden. He tried to take us out, and here we are just putting it right back up.
Workers who are putting the Pentagon back together pillar by pillar pledged to have the job dubbed the Phoenix Project finished by September 11th, 2002.
We're working a lot of overtime and Saturdays, you know, so we're going to try to get it done.
The plane hit about right here.
That's right. As it was entering in, we're standing at about the angle that the plane hit the building.
Brett Eaton, who's working on a long-term $3 billion Pentagon renovation, says fortunately the jetliner hit a section of the building that had just been reinforced. 189 people died, but it could have been much worse.
Those structural reinforcements did help hold the building together about 30 to 35 minutes before it collapsed, giving people time to escape.
Now this west side of the Pentagon is being renovated for a second time, this time with a red, white, and blue attitude.
The fact that it is the military headquarters of the United States, the fact that we're engaged in the war that we are now, I feel it's absolutely vital to get this building up as soon as possible.
But not lost in this can-do spirit is a reverence for what happened 100 days ago. Do you think about the people that lost their lives?
Just about every day. Yep, just about every day, especially when the planes fly across.
Bob Orr, CBS News, the Pentagon.
And then there is the crash scene in a Pennsylvania field. Medical examiners say they have now identified all 40 passengers and crew killed 100 days ago in the crash of United Flight 93 after an apparent struggle with 4 hijackers. Since September 11th, friends and relatives have come to the remote site southeast of Pittsburgh to pay respects and remember. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America, comforting the mourners. Sometimes even the professionals need help.
Sources tell CBS News a classic bureaucratic turf war has broken out over John Walker. The
U.S. bombers return to action, and U.S. Marines begin a dangerous cleanup job. Christmas Eve brings little joy to the little town of Bethlehem, trapped in the Middle East conflict. And an Eye on America special series, how Americans everywhere have changed since September 11th.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
And good evening. Dan is off tonight. I'm Russ Mitchell. On this night before Christmas, the FBI says the man foiled in an alleged attempt to blow up a transatlantic American Airlines flight had enough explosives in his shoes to trigger, quote, a major disaster. The suspect is behind bars in the Boston area under constant watch. And as Jim Axelrod reports, America is on guard tonight in a whole new way.
In the shadow of Boston's Logan Airport, the latest reminder of America's vulnerability made his first court appearance today. Court papers and his British passport identify him as Richard Reed, a man prosecutors say tried to set off explosives hidden in his shoes as he was flying from Paris to Miami on Saturday.
It is a functional device. It could have exploded as it was configured.
Prosecutors say 90 minutes into American Airlines Flight 63, a flight attendant smelled what she thought was a burnt match. A passenger pointed to Reed. It appeared he was attempting to set fire to the inner tongue of his sneaker. She then noticed a wire protruding from his sneaker. When he pushed her to the ground, passengers took over, in a way maybe best described after September 11th as, let's roll.
And then like 5 or 6 people at once came up and just jumped on the guy. It's pretty amazing.
And then we tied him up with belts and wire, and I think we gave him a couple of doctors gave him an injection.
Heroics aside, the incident raises several troubling questions about security. Reed had been turned away from the same flight the day before, traveling with a one-way ticket and just one small bag. On December 11th, the FAA had issued a security advisory about checking shoes for weapons. Sunday morning, that became a security directive. While passengers on Flight 63 say security was tight.
I don't know what else they could have done, except run my body physically through the scanner.
Travel experts say this episode underscores the limits of current procedures.
We don't check passengers for explosives. We check them for metal objects, but not explosives. And eventually we'll probably have to get there as well.
Reed is in Boston because that's where the plane was diverted to. French authorities have also ID'd Reed as Tariq Raja, a Sri Lankan. He's reportedly gone by a third name as well, Abdel Rahim. At this point, the FBI reports no links between this man and Osama bin Laden. His passport is new, issued by the British Embassy in Brussels, and dated December 7th. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
And security is tighter than ever at many airports this evening, especially at de Gaulle Airport outside Paris, where American Flight 63 originated. They brought in more bomb-sniffing dogs to inspect more shoes today. And beginning tomorrow, Swiss airports plan to inspect the shoes of all passengers boarding any U.S. carrier. In Afghanistan, and the world begins celebrating the arrival of the brand new 2002. In New York, revelers are ready to party and to remember the thousands lost in the attack on America. We'll show you some of the newest weapons in the war against terror. And Eye on America, friendship put to the test. How Europe stood up for America the year we changed.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
And good evening. Dan is off tonight. I'm Russ Mitchell. A year America will never forget is rapidly coming to an end. Our odyssey through 2001 is going to be over in just a few short hours, and many would say the old year is leaving not a moment too soon. The new year has already arrived in some parts of planet Earth. CBS News correspondent Tom Fenton begins our coverage this evening of the world premiere of 2002.
5. As always, the New Year's celebration began on the other side of the world. Australia kicked off the midnight revelry with massive fireworks on the harbour front in Sydney. The famous bridge silhouetted against the smoke. But this time, there was a grim irony in the smoke. The city has been surrounded by raging bushfires for days, and many may have wondered if they hadn't had enough smoke for 1 year. In China, the home of fireworks, the set-piece explosions were almost as big. Buoyed up by a surging economy, China's rich economic zone next to Hong Kong also launched a sky full of fireworks. There were few hints of the horrors of the year 2001, but monks in Tokyo, to the sound of 108 gongs, prayed for the departing year and symbolically burnt and purified its passing. Japan and South Korea, excited at the prospect of co-hosting the Soccer World Cup in 2002, also lit the sky with fire. But those who weren't burning money spent it and counted it. Belgium and Germany were busy spending francs and Deutschmarks to beat the midnight deadline for the arrival of the new euro currency. And in Greece, they were spending drachmas as fast as they could too. 300 million people in 12 European countries will be saying goodbye to their own historic currencies, and with the arrival of the new year, will find themselves bound together with the new common euro money.
If you look to the future, this brings a sense of identity that will change all the European environment.
Paris provided its usual splendor, although the French and Italians, always more careful with cash, were looking at the new European money and hoping they could get used to it. Midnight passed just over half an hour ago across the Channel, and here in London, just across the Thames, Big Ben is limbering up the great chimes of midnight. But a combination of heavy security and cold is expected to keep most of the festivities off the streets. Tom Fenton, CBS News, London.
Countdown goes on. Even as the ball drops, recovery workers will be searching ground zero for victims of September 11th. CBS's Mika Brzezinski is in Times Square for the beginning of a new year in New York. Good evening, Mika.
Good evening, Russ. With 500,000 people expected to watch the ball drop tonight, security here at Times Square is as elaborate as the celebration itself. The theme tonight is patriotism, and the revelers who came here to celebrate, defiant.
Checkpoints further up. If you want to go to Times Square area, move up to 49th Street.
There is no getting into Times Square tonight without passing through the frozen zone first. Nothing to do with the bone-chilling temperatures, everything to do with the more intense security here than during the Millennium celebration 2 years ago.
Security tonight in wake of 9/11 will be tight. The police department will be out here in force. They will be checking backpacks. They will be looking for alcohol. They have been checking cars. They're very vigilant.
But revelers don't seem to mind the searches, metal detectors, and blocked streets.
We don't let the of what's going on taint our event because we're strong people. We can handle any situation.
Manhole covers are sealed. No trash cans, no parking. While sharpshooters watch from above, the air will be tested for chemical agents, and officers are equipped with high-tech sensors to detect radioactivity.
Special efforts have been made to seal off the area from anybody that might want to come in with any kind of a device.
Linda Dean and her daughters, Katie and Elizabeth, came from Fairfax, Virginia.
I wasn't nervous until about a week ago. I thought, but decided to come anyway. Happy New Year!
September 11th hangs over this event. Red, white, and blue have become the New Year's colors. The Times Square
Have joined the hunt for the leader of the Taliban, Mullah Muhammad.